Defying gravity? How about defying logic? Hey there, folks. I don't remember the last time I talked, like, as a main channel video about a movie that isn't even out yet. Like, I've done it with sort of more broad things like franchises. I've talked about it with like DC and Marvel, Doctor Who, certainly. But the last time that I've talked just about a movie that isn't even out yet, but I've still got enough thoughts to fill a video and I feel like it's worth the main channel, it's been a while. It's been quite a while. Wicked, though. The upcoming release of Wicked is really weird. It's really weird to me what they're doing. So we're going to pause right there and add a little note. Hey, it's me. During the editing of this, Wicked sort of had a whole discourse crop up around it for just the most ridiculous reason. Overblown story made short. The film star Cynthia Erivo went off on a fan-made poster, and her anger over that blew up into a multi-day story. If I'm really lucky, then by the time this video comes out, this won't really be in the conversation anymore, but knowing the internet, I doubt that's going to be the case. And if I don't address it here, it's going to eat up all the comments. You want my opinion? Here it is. Was her response overly harsh? Yes, it was. But what it really comes across as to me is the straw that broke the camel's back. This feels like something that was just the tipping point of her having to deal with, I'm sure, a hefty amount of nonsense between having to promote this thing and who knows how much racist crap that has been thrown her way. But of course, this is going to get all the headlines because this is the point where she snapped and bit back. Again, possibly at somebody who didn't deserve it. But anyone who pretends that this is just about her response to a piece of fan art is being disingenuous. And I'm sure all of us will go, well, I wouldn't snap like that. And maybe dealing in isolation, you wouldn't. But you don't know what she's been dealing with. You don't know how much crap she's been going through. You don't know how much she's had to hold down up to this point. That does not mean I am co-signing what she said. It's a bad look. But ultimately, my point is I don't want any of this to be what this video is about. It doesn't even really feed into the points I'm eventually going to be making. Because what this video is supposed to be is about the filmmaking choices. But this crap has dominated the conversation during the time I'm editing it, and I expect still will be by the time this video comes out. But that's all I'm going to say about it. So if that's what you were here for, well, stick around anyway, maybe. I'd appreciate it. Now, again, preface, I haven't seen the movie. So obviously, do I know if everything I'm going to talk about works? No, of course I don't. I don't think it's going to, and I'll talk about why. But also I'll point out, if you're excited for Wicked, great. I'm not trying to dampen your enthusiasm. I'm not trying to pour Santa on anybody's wick, nothing like that. That having been said, like, the more I find out about this thing, the more I'm like, what are you doing? It is so bizarre, and part of why I think my brain's latched onto it is one of the things I've kind of made a habit of doing on here is parsing the corporate mindset that leads to a lot of the decisions for what happens in our entertainment. Except I have a hard time parsing this. Like, about the only part of it that makes any sense to me at all is the idea of do it as two movies make more money. But like, I'll come back to that. But overall, this whole thing is very, very strange. A little bit more context, I suppose. I have not read in full the original book that spawned all this. I have not read the novel Wicked. I have seen the musical Wicked, and I mean seen it proper. I lived in New York City for 4 years. I actually saw it on Broadway. It's a great show. I had a lot of fun. I like the soundtrack. I'm not obsessed with it, but you know, as a theater kid, yeah, I like Wicked. But I suppose that brings me to the first bias that I should kind of get out of the way. I just think fundamentally that the type of show that Wicked is, if you're going to make musicals into a movie, this is the worst kind of thing to make into a movie. These spectacle musicals, these mega musicals, I think are the worst ones to be adapted into film. And here's why. It's not the only thing, granted, but a big part of what makes these things so special on stage is it just goes bigger and grander, a scope and just a staging that you can't believe you're watching happen directly in front of you at that scope, at that size. So examples of what I'm talking about include, yes, Wicked, but also say Les Miserables, Phantom of the Opera, Cats even, to be honest. Now, some of these have gotten adaptations. Most of them haven't been good. And I do think the spectacle aspect is one of the reasons why, because part of what makes these things so impressive is it's happening on a stage. Can you even believe it? Well, the thing is, those things translated to film, it just becomes standard blockbuster filmmaking. Things like the gigantic head of Oz, or the winged monkeys climbing up on the set, or Elphaba lifting off the first time and flying on stage in front of you. That's impressive when you see it on a stage. In a movie, this is all standard stuff. None of this is going to be special. None of this is going to be grand. None of this is going to be any more spectacle than anything else. Does it make it impossible to be good? No, but I think that inherently hampers even adapting a play like this into a movie in the first place. But let's move on. Let's start to get into the stuff that has been making me go, wait, what? What? So here's the big thing. They broke it into two parts. This is weird from a marketing perspective, but I'm going to circle back onto the marketing. But they are doing this as two films. And in and of itself, I could have gone like, oh, okay, maybe. But then what made me want to talk about this and what has made me go, what are you doing? Was we found out a little while ago the runtime for the movie coming out later this year and the song list. And those two things in conjunction don't make sense. So the length of this movie is 2 hours and 40 minutes. That is roughly the length of the entire play minus a break for intermission. To remind you, they cut the story in half, and part one is as long as the entire show. Okay. But then the clincher was the song list, which is just the Act 1 songs. That's it. They are taking the exact same number of songs and stretching it across double the length of time. This movie is going to have 11 songs in it, over 2 hours and 40 minutes. Now, just for reference, for like some other musicals that have been made into movies, Chicago, under 2 hours, 17 songs. Dreamgirls, little over 2 hours, 32 songs. Sweeney Todd, just under 2 hours, 18 to 20 songs, depending on how you count them, because some of them bleed into each other. But 11 songs for nearly 3 hours. You know what that song to length ratio is? Not necessarily a number of songs, but in raw time, because we already know these songs. We know how long they are in the show. And so it's about 40 minutes worth of songs in a 2 hour and 40 minute movie. You know what that's the equivalent of as far as musicals? Joker 2. Now, I'm not going to claim that Joker 2 is bombing because it doesn't honor the musical tradition and has too few songs. I haven't seen the movie. I think it's bombing for a hefty number of reasons, but like, that's the only comparison I can think of, and that's something that most people are not even discussing as a musical. It barely qualifies as a musical by most standards. And you're taking one of the best-known musicals of the last few decades, and you're doubling the length with no new songs. Like, if you're trying to just do this musical, what are you thinking? And I've been trying to figure that out, and I'll tell you, there's a lot of speculation from fan communities around Wicked, and not a lot of meat on those bones, not a lot to back it up. I've seen multiple people claim like, oh, the director said they were taking more from the book. They don't cite it. I can't find it. Here's what I can tell you that I found. Stephen Schwartz, who is the original composer, lyricist for the play, and he is an executive producer on the film. So he is working on the film. He sat down and he had an interview with, I believe it was Variety, and he said a few things. The thing that he said that makes a tiny bit of sense, but not really, was that one of the reasons they decided to break this up into two films is they could not figure out how to keep the story going after the song Defying Gravity. Now, that's the best known song from the show. That is the Act 1 closer. It is the best song of the show, and it is a absolute bring the house down kind of number. It's why it's right before the intermission. And I pointed this out a while ago in another video, but yeah, some things are actually built around the intermission because there's a reason the play doesn't just try and keep going after that. You have that song, you get your break, you get up, you go to the bathroom, you regroup, you come back, and then the story keeps going. It takes advantage of the intermission. Another play that does that very well is Into the Woods, because on the other side of its intermission, it has a massive tonal gear shift. And it kind of depends on that intermission to work. If you've ever tried watching the film adaptation of Into the Woods, you can see why that doesn't work, because that gear shift just happens in real time and it's like so jarring. Because in the original version, Act 1, everything hits a happily ever after. And so you get up, you use the bathroom, you stretch your legs a little bit, you come back, you sit down for Act 2. And over the course of that time, you have the time to think, wait a minute. If everything seemed like it wrapped up all happy, what is Act 2 going to be? And even if you don't know what's coming, just that thought alone kind of cushions you to expect the unexpected for when the massive gear shift in tone happens in the second act. And the movie just didn't have that. So I absolutely respect and appreciate the difficulties of trying to work with a show that has taken proper advantage of its intermission. And I would say a song like Defying Gravity absolutely does that. That song is so big and so huge, yeah, you kind of do need a breather. But there's a difference between a 20-minute intermission, after which you come right back to the story, and a year, which is how long it's going to be until we get the second half of this. So that's why I only kind of get that notion. Again, I get it insofar as I understand it's a challenge, and I can point to something like Into the Woods where they didn't account for the intermission and it hurt the film, but that's just part of it. Schwartz also said stuff like, if we did it as one movie, we'd have to cut things, or it'd have to be an incredibly long movie. Like, okay, but you're releasing an incredibly long movie. You're releasing a 2-hour and 40-minute movie. You're saying that you would have had to cut stuff. So we know that the studio is willing to release a 2-hour, 40-minute movie. That is as long as the play is. What do you mean you would have had to cut stuff? What are you talking about? This is where a lot of speculation comes in about what is going on in here, because Schwartz does say that there is new stuff in there and that changes were quote unquote additive. They wanted to be sure that they added and contributed new things. Now, in a way that's good, but the fact that you aren't adding new songs, that's a big problem. The very nature of musicals, how they generally are intended to work, is that the songs happen at an incredibly important point, be it for the plot or the characters or both. The singing happens at major important points. It brings emphasis to what it is that's going on. They are meant to be associated with the most important parts of the show. That's why you can listen to the soundtrack of something like Wicked, which is not a show like, say, Les Mis or Rent or Sweeney Todd, where almost the entire thing is just sung start to back. There are dialogue scenes in between the songs in something like Wicked, but you can just listen to the soundtrack to Wicked and pretty much get the story. You will get what's going on because the important stuff is in the songs. So if you have doubled the length of your first act, but not added any songs, that means you've done one of two things. Either you have stuffed it full of filler that doesn't matter so that the songs continue to maintain the most weight and carry the most impact. That is unlikely, given Schwartz said that changes were intended to be additive. That brings us to the second option. You're adding stuff that is important but will lack the emphasis that a musical is designed to give to important moments. You're adding new stuff, and even if it's good plot-wise, it's not fitting within the structure of a musical because now important stuff no longer is accompanied by a song. What would you even be adding anyway? This is where stuff gets speculative. A lot of fans think that they're going to be putting in more stuff from the book. That's a possibility. It would be a weird choice, though, because the differences, again, I haven't read the book, but I am familiar with the differences. The differences between the book and the play are not minor. They are major, major differences. There are massive pivots in terms of story, characters, character dynamics, the way that they interact with each other, how they impact each other. There's a lot that is very, very different. So you need to understand that the musical, the original stage musical, it didn't like just take the book and go, oh, well, we'll trim these bits, but then we'll faithfully adapt the rest of it. No, what they adapted, they changed quite a bit as well. And even if you brought back in what was cut, most of what was cut, like fully, was the greater picture, because the book has a bit more of an emphasis on the grander political landscape of Oz, whereas the musical has some of that in there, but is much more laser focused on its core cast of characters, which for a musical is the better way to do it. You should have it be character driven by and large in most cases. So what would you even add that would actually contribute to these people and to what the story that has been beloved on Broadway for years is? What are those things that you're adding, and why do you think they would help? The thing is, I'm not sure if they do think that they'd help. Because I don't know if you've noticed in the marketing a couple of weird things. The first is, this is being advertised and is in fact even titled as just Wicked. Not Wicked Part 1, not Wicked Act 1, just Wicked. Now, fans who have been keeping up with this, they are aware it's only Part 1. But as I constantly have to remind geeky fans of things like Marvel or Star Wars or Star Trek or Doctor Who, you core fans are not the majority of the audience. You are a minority. You are important. I'm not saying you don't matter at all, but I am saying that you on your own are not enough for something with this big a budget to make its money back. They have to bring in the mainstream audiences, and mainstream audiences haven't been following the production of this movie. They don't know it's only Part 1, and it's not being advertised as a Part 1. And another thing I've realized, if this ends with Defying Gravity, then the trailers are showing a fair bit of the literal last scene of the movie. It feels like they're hiding the fact that this is a Part 1. And it's going to feel like a Part 1. Because there are some times where you can break a story into pieces, but you still can bring a thematic conclusion, if not a full plot conclusion. I'd point to something like Across the Spider-Verse. Is the logistical plot all sorted? No. There was a cliffhanger, major things to deal with. Thematically, though, there's a lot of themes that have come full circle, so it still feels like a complete experience. If all you adapt for a full movie is one act of the play, that's not designed to feel like a full experience, because you're not meant to only take that in on its own. You're meant to get the second half after a 20-minute break. But you're not even giving people the heads up of that, because I think they realize if they were open about the fact that this is only Part 1, that would probably turn off a chunk of the mainstream audience. So they're hiding it. And they're also kind of hiding the fact that it's a musical. Like, not fully, not 100%, but there were very few highlights of the songs at all in the trailers, and of the two main trailers that are out at my time of recording, you don't see them sing at all. You can hear the songs in the background, but you never see a character actually sing. There is one Buy Your Tickets Now trailer that actually does put some singing on display, but that is not the primary one being pushed. That's not the one being played in front of movies in theaters. And it's also the most recent one to come out of the three. And the weird thing is, this is actually part of a trend at the moment. I checked the main trailers for all of the 2020 musical movies that I could think of, and there is shockingly little singing on display. You've got stuff like Tick, Tick, Boom, or The Color Purple, or West Side Story, which basically just have one scene where you can actually see a character singing at all. Stuff like Wonka or Mean Girls or Jingle Jangle will show some dancing, but not show singing. Of the ones I checked, In the Heights was pretty upfront about it. The Dear Evan Hansen trailer hit it for about 2/3, but then is upfront with it. The Prom leaned into it in the back half of its trailer. Then there's Matilda the Musical, but they literally put the musical in the title of that one, so there was no point in hiding it. Honestly, maybe part of the problem is the ones that showed the most, In the Heights and Dear Evan Hansen, both failed at the box office. Even The Prom, who knows? It was a Netflix release. There's a bizarrely consistent trend of musicals being afraid to market themselves as musicals that I could honestly probably make a whole other video out of if people wanted me to. But for now, just realize Wicked falls into this trend, even if it's not the only one doing this. I'm just looking at this and going, okay, you took one of the most beloved musicals of the past few decades. You are marketing it as if you are giving people a complete product when you're not. And you're not really leaning on the fact that it's a musical, maybe partially because you have diluted that music so much by stuffing in a double-length runtime with no new songs that people might actually feel cheated if you try to present it as a musical when it really would barely qualify at this point. I suspect that the decision to break it into two parts was probably a studio mandate. They probably wanted to make more money for what they were going to spend on this. And the thing is, though, the two-part movie, I know it was like all in vogue, kicked off by the final Harry Potter movie, but most audiences don't like these things. Like, you can do a trilogy, you can do sequels, but you're taking something that is normally a singular package and you're breaking it into two pieces. That may have led to certain financial benefits for, say, The Hunger Games or Twilight and things like that, but audiences never really appreciated them very much. Granted, Dune did it relatively recently, but also Dune is like that thick. And we know how long Wicked the musical should be. And we don't know how long part 2 is going to be. But if it's as long as part 1, then you are looking at over 5 hours. Wicked is not a 5-hour story, but you're going to make it one. And you're going to stretch the songs so thin by diluting them, by putting all this stuff in between them that isn't normally there. Those songs were paced out at a rate that made sense for a musical, and now they're just not going to be anymore. And I just have to ask, who is this for? If it's for fans of the musical, do you think they're going to thank you for giving them a ton of stuff that the story demonstrably didn't need to work? And none of it is singing? Do you think they're going to thank you for that? Maybe they will. And also, I want to be clear, I'm not predicting that this is going to bomb in any way. In fact, pre-sales on this are incredibly high. I think this is going to have an incredibly good opening weekend. What it'll do after that? I don't know. This feels like a combination of a studio mandate and then that leading to overindulgence. I suspect that the studio said, we would like to get 2 films out of this. The people making it went along with that, but then realized that we're going to have to add some padding, because if you just straight adapted the play, you'd end up with 2 80-minute movies. You'd have to add at least 10 to 20 minutes to like have it feel like a full proper length movie. But then they just kept adding and adding and adding. And now it's this bloated nonsense. And who knows? Maybe it'll work. But one has to wonder, who are you even making this for? Because one of the defenses I often hear about adapting, particularly a stage show, to film, is that more people are able to see it. Because the thing about a stage show is you can only see it if it is being performed where you are and you can afford to go. Theater tickets are expensive, especially good seats. I know that. That having been said, you can't really make the argument that this is bringing Wicked the musical to the masses when it's not. It is bringing Wicked Plus, Wicked Premium, Wicked Prime to the masses. It's not going to give audiences even a comparable experience of going and seeing the play. You can't tell me that's what it's going to do, because it's just not. So you're not bringing it to the audiences that might have liked it but couldn't have seen the play. You are adding in a bunch of stuff that, again, maybe the fandom's excited about now. I don't think they're going to thank you after they see it. I think it's going to struggle to make its money back. And I think we'll get part 2 only because it's already been shot and they are already in post-production on it. But I think they are going to struggle to break even on this because they are making some weird decisions. And I might be right, I might be wrong. But, from one witch to another, girl, what are you doing? All right. Those are my thoughts on Wicked that I just had to get out of my head. Like, it's an odd thing for me to go on this long about a movie that's not even out yet, but sometimes this thing worms its way into my brain and I need to get it out into the world so that I can work on other stuff because I got a lot to do. But anyways, thank you very much for joining me on this rambling rant of confusion. This is so weird. It's so weird to me. But what are your thoughts on it? Whatever they are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills, enables me to do this as my living. Even if you can't help me out that way, like, share, subscribe. But don't worry too much about it. While those things help me out, what I really want you to remember is that you are beautiful, you are valid, and you are loved. You are the council, and I'm just running the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned. And now to give thanks to my highest supporting patrons: Robin Moore, Zubin Lutfula, Goddess Elida, Welsh Wrestling Geeks, Oliver B., Melissa Pedersen, Movie Turtle, Ulrich Bogdan, Loki Eris, Melinda Walters, Auntie Kate 808, Becky Sparks, Bernabe Lex the Poodle, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperl, Dave Hall, Quite Bearish, Rosalind Bennett, Adam R.D.L. Taylor, Pau Baraba Jago, Mira G, and Sir Didymus is my favorite. I don't know, it feels right that it's October the first time you're seeing all 3 of these at the same time.